Every island has a story. Every island is different, and every island is a treasure trove of places and people to write about.
Can you please introduce yourself? Please feel free to state not only mention your profession, but also what you have done thus far in your particular field.
Sure. I studied journalism at the University of Texas because I always knew I wanted to write. It wasn't until I went to Europe in one summer during my college years that I wanted to travel. So I figured writing and travel was what I was going to pursue in my life.
When did you decide or realize that this is what you wanted to pursue?
When I was in my early 20s, right out of college, and I wanted to figure out how to travel and write and combine the two as a career. I started off by thinking maybe I could be a flight attendant and then write stories about the places I saw. But I wasn't really flight attendant material. I don't like to be around people who are feeling ill on a plane. So then I decided to look for a job in the travel industry field. And I found a small trade magazine in New York that was looking for somebody to proofread copy, to go to the printer on the nights the magazine was printed. So I started doing that. I learned a lot in that job. I spent 7 years at that job. But then I transitioned over to working for airline in-flight magazines, the ones that are in the seat pockets or used to be in the seat pockets of planes. I don't think they do that anymore with COVID. And I spent a great 5 or 6 years there. I loved it. Then I took some time off to raise my daughter. So I was freelancing, writing a column for Travel and Leisure magazine, and really wanting to get back into full-time work, which I did do when my daughter was old enough for school. That's when I joined Travel Weekly, the largest trade magazine in the US. And I spent 37 years there, loving every single minute of it. In my duties there, I covered destinations in Europe, in the Caribbean, in Canada. I would go and write stories, interview people, talk to travel agents, and come back and write the stories of that particular trip. I did that for a long time until about 20 years ago. I was assigned full-time as the Caribbean editor. And that's where I really, really had the best time of my life. I was covering the Caribbean, a region I have known I have come to love. The people, the music, the food, the scenery, the tourism industry, everything about it, I love. I just stepped away from that, from Travel Weekly only recently. I wanted to get away from daily deadlines, but I'm hoping to continue to write for Travel Weekly from time to time, as well as other publications. If you have a dream of writing and traveling, it is possible to do it. It takes a few years of sort of grunt work, if you can find it at a local newspaper or a local, maybe hotel association or tourism board. But the rewards are great, and I urge you to try and follow your dreams.
Thank you for that response, Miss. From what you've been saying, it sounds like you're very passionate about the Caribbean, and you're very passionate about your job. So I'd like to ask you, what were some of the factors or some of the influential factors that influenced you in your choice to enter your field of specialty?
Well, I think the first big influencer in my life was the dean of the journalism school at University of Texas. He he knew that I loved writing because I was writing for the student newspaper, and he said it might be hard to land your first job, but when you do, that will launch you. He said, be persistent, apply for as many jobs in local newspapers, anywhere, just to get your foot in the door. And I did follow that advice, although I didn't go the newspaper route. I went the trade magazine route, but both are applicable to getting a foot in the door. I think other influencers were people that I met during the course of my years at Travel Weekly who were brilliant people who had been in tourism for years, who could see the changes coming in the industry, who were deeply involved in linking tourism to in the Caribbean, to making sure that the local people benefited from tourism, not just the big hotels that were going up and the big attractions and theme parks. It was always, these people were always concerned about getting the benefits of tourism to the local people in the Caribbean. And that's what I really liked.
From hearing your experience, it seems as if journalism, or it's more aware now to me that journalism is a broad field. And you did not take a more traditional route of the newspaper, you took a trade magazine. So I would like to ask you, did you encounter any difficulties while preparing for or upon beginning your career?
I think that back in those days, it was it's not like today. There were no computers, no laptops. I started out on a typewriter. I started out proofreading copy, and all of it was something I had studied in my journalism classes. So I was very, very familiar with what that part of it. I'll tell you where the struggle has come for me is adapting to the way the industry has changed over the years. I'm obviously not technical, as you can tell by the fact that I couldn't even get on the Zoom call. I think that getting your foot in the door, learning as much as you can from whatever job you're in, even if it's like getting coffee for people. I mean, it's you have to start at the bottom somewhere, but if you stick to it and learn from it, you're going to go places, especially now that you all are so familiar with the technology of today and the social media and everything. I applaud you for that, because I've somehow managed over the years to keep up with it, but not very well. So keep learning, keep up to date with all the technical advances, and you'll be equipped to really jump right in and start.
Throughout your entire speech and from you talking to us, you've been sprinkling drops of advice here and there, like follow your dream. If you have a passion for writing, go ahead and do it. Try your best to, broaden your experiences, broaden your opportunities, and take what is there. I've also heard you've taught us how to adapt, how to start from the bottom and work your way up to the top through your experience. But is there any advice you have for future journalists, those who are considering this career path, especially travel magazines?
Well, I would say, first of all, get to know the reporters on the local newspapers. Like in Jamaica, you probably already have heard of Janet Silvera. She's a renowned journalist. She writes for the Gleaner. She is an absolute wonderful source of knowledge and always ready to talk to young aspiring journalists. And if you want, I can let her know that some of you may want to contact her. She would be so glad to talk to you. But in whatever area you're from, I would start with the local newspapers, follow them, learn the reporters' names, follow their stories, see how their writing techniques are. I would also follow social media, follow who's posting what on Instagram and Facebook, etc. Many of the newspapers have websites that you can read the news on a daily basis. I would also encourage you to perhaps start a blog of your own or join an organization online called LinkedIn, which you can say you're aspiring to travel and write. Does anyone have any advice for you? There's so many people with such great experience and knowledge in the Caribbean that it would be such a benefit to you all to try and contact them. I would certainly be able to, or try to be able to help you with that, with the contacts. I think that when you do travel, keep an eye out for, even in your own town, just keep an eye out or carry a notebook and see what you see when you're walking around the markets or the plazas or on the beaches. It really helps to write down what you see each day, as in a journal, because writing just improves with more writing. I've done that for years. I've carried a notebook on every single trip, and some of the notes were transferred into my stories, but other notes were just for me to remember a certain person I met at the market or a beautiful sunset I saw somewhere. Just keep writing. It always gets better. It really does.
What has been your favorite story to write and why?
Oh, what a great question. My gosh. To pick out one story. Wow. Well, of all the stories I've written about the Caribbean, I think that my favorite story was my first trip to Cuba, and I was astounded. My eyes were open. I loved the destination and the people. Certainly didn't approve of some of the government people, but I loved writing about it because it was such an eye opener to me, and I'd never experienced what I saw there in Cuba, and I got a lot of positive response about that from readers who had not yet been to Cuba and were wanting to know how to go there legally. But Cuba was just one of many stories. I think every island that I visited brought forth a kind of surprise and wonder that I saw. And mostly it was always the people that I met, and not the officials, but the locals. I love talking to people in the markets and the vendors and the people, sort of not the front desk people at hotels, but the women who cleaned the room or brought supplies. Or their stories were so interesting, and I really thrived knowing some of these people, and I've kept in touch with them over the years. Every island has a story. Every island is different, and every island is a treasure trove. of of places and people to write about.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Miss Myers. It was very nice to hear your experience, listen to the advice you've given.
If you are a professional interested in sharing the experiences you've made along your journey toward your field, please email us at thestudent98@gmail.com. Comment down below what other professions you would like to hear from.